Alrighty, we are live. Let's get this camera nice and centered. I'm gonna get centered myself. There we go. Fantastic. Hello everyone. Let me make sure that this audio is working here and that there's no issues with the video or the audio or anything like that. So bear with me for one moment as I double check that. Oh, how do I do this? How do I do this here? I'm watching a show on YouTube. For the first time ever, I actually purchased an episode of a show. I'm supposed to be recording it on my television, but the problem is that for some reason, every time I record it, it doesn't actually record. So I'm stuck here trying to find it online, trying to figure it out, and I can't find it anywhere. I can't find it online anywhere. So I resorted to purchasing it on YouTube because I found out that I am able to do that. So I just don't want to lose this show here as I double check the audio and everything. I apologize, I have to watch through some of this random blabber at the beginning, but I want to make sure it's working. Yeah, seems to be working. Good. Fantastic. This is not super centered. There we go. That looks better. There we go. It's much better. Okay. Well, guys, welcome to episode number 23, I believe it is, of Azren's Journal. For those of you who have never seen this series before, it's pretty straightforward. This is the segment on my YouTube channel where I share my personal language learning experience and, of course, give you guys a whole bunch of different language learning advice. Let's just dive right in. There's a lot of things I want to share here. And so let's start so this isn't a super long video. First and foremost, I leave Calgary in 3 days. Literally 3. For those of you who have not been watching the videos regularly, I'm going to be spending 2 weeks in France and I'm going to be in Taiwan for 5 weeks. So basically for a 7-week window, almost 2 months, I'm going to be out of town. I will be in France visiting a friend of mine and doing some touring. And then I'll be in Taiwan for 5 weeks studying Mandarin. It's going to be a lot of fun. This is the first time since February of 2018 since I have done a trip for the purpose of language learning. It's been a long time. It's been an especially long time since I have been to France. It's been about 7 years now, approximately. And so ultimately, I'm looking forward to this trip. I find that my French level is probably going to improve in the 2 weeks that I spend in France. And my Mandarin level is likely dramatically going to improve for the 5 weeks that I'm in Taiwan. And I want to recommend something to a lot of the language learners watching this. I am a big believer of going abroad to learn different languages. That is a massive belief that I have. And it's something that I find, obviously a lot of people do it, but it's something that I think more people could be taking advantage of. It's fun. You get to really understand the culture. You get to meet different people. You learn. Your learning curve goes from this, slowly going up, which is the norm, to rapidly going up at an extremely fast pace. So it's something I cannot recommend more. It's something that I believe in oh so strongly. So that is the biggest thing that is new in my world nowadays. With me flying out in 3 days, that's obviously the biggest thing that's on my mind. Outside of that, I want to jump into the main topic of today's YouTube video, or rather the primary thing that made me sit down and want to record this video, which is the following: is it discouraging to learn a language? And I want to discuss this a little bit. I think when you talk to a lot of people who are in this whole language learning space, language learners in general, I would argue that there's a significant percentage of people who find that learning a language is a frustrating process. It's a process where you struggle a lot. It's a process where you forget a lot of words and vocabulary and grammar and so many things. You struggle with the pronunciation. There's a lot to it, and I would argue that many people feel discouraged for a significant percentage of the process. Obviously, there are lots of wins along the way. Obviously, not everything is bad, and obviously, there are lots of things that go well, and that could be fun. But especially when we get into people who are learning languages, who are learning it for a practical purpose and are not learning because they like languages, definitely I find people think it's discouraging. And the big question becomes, I'm going to write it on this board here, the big question becomes the following. Why? Why is it such a discouraging process? Why is this happening? And I think obviously there's a lot of reasons, but a primary reason, a big one for many people, is actually tied weirdly to sports. You see, anyone who has played a sport before or who has tried to learn a sport, normally you are grouped into divisions. For example, I played soccer for about 13 years of my life, and I would go to tryouts, and based on my performance at the tryouts, I would be placed into a different division. We had the highest divisions, we had the lowest divisions, and we had everything in between. Once you're grouped into divisions, you are going to be playing against teams that have a reasonably similar level as you. And so what would happen is that the only people I would be interacting with would be people around the same level as me, for the most part. The only time I would interact with people who are better than me would be with coaches or with people who were there essentially to help me get better. Now, language learning does not actually work this way. For language learning, if you are a beginner, it doesn't mean that every time you interact with people, you are interacting with beginners. In fact, when we're learning languages, what tends to happen is we either A, try to talk with native speakers frequently, or B, we're always thinking about, oh man, I want to be able to have conversations with native speakers. I want to be able to understand TV and listen to the radio and listen to podcasts and express my thoughts and all of that. But here's the thing. We can't be thinking about that on day one. If we are thinking about that as of day one, it doesn't make any sense. It would be like me trying to learn tennis and me on day one thinking about trying to be as good as a professional tennis player, like Rafael Nadal or Roger Federer or a really top class tennis player. Because Roger Federer, him being a professional tennis player, it's kind of like being a native speaker. The native speakers are the professionals. They're the professionals of the language. And if that's what your singular focus is, it's going to be difficult for you to acknowledge your minor improvements in the language. In other words, if the thing that you are comparing yourself to in your mind is perfect fluency or someone who speaks it without really thinking, and that's always what you're comparing yourself to, when you get really good at one grammar tense or something, although that is a major accomplishment, you're not going to acknowledge that as a major accomplishment because you are comparing yourself to someone who already knows 17 grammar tenses and have them nailed down and knows all this vocabulary and pronunciation. So you have to understand that when you have minor wins in the language, you have to acknowledge them. You can't think to yourself, oh, well, yeah, now I can do the present tense, but I'm still so far away from being fluent. On a similar topic, a little bit of a tangent, what will often happen is people default into thinking, I want to speak like a native speaker. I want to speak like them. But here's the thing. Most of us, if not all of us, most of us, let's say, don't have the audacity to say that I want to play tennis like Roger Federer. I want to play soccer like whoever, Cristiano Ronaldo, or like so-and-so, or like David Beckham. No, we don't have the audacity when we enter a sport, for the most part, as an adult, to say that I want to play like a professional in the sport. We don't, because we're like, oh yeah, I probably won't get there. Instead, we pick targets based on our current life situation that makes sense for us. So some people might say, you know what? I'm playing tennis because it's fun for me, and I think it's a great way to keep in shape. I'll try and improve. I'll work on my forehand. I'll work on my serve, but that's all I'm trying to do. And that's their goal, and that's their race that they're trying to run. Some people might, like I can think about myself. I was playing badminton. I was really into badminton for a short stint of time. And for me, my goal, I'm not going to ever play professionally. I don't practice enough. I have no desire, like nothing. I don't want to do it. So my goal was I'm going to go once or twice a week. I want to get my cardio up. That's something I want to have a lot of fun. And I want to be able to step on the court with the average person who does not play in a competitive league and beat them. That was my goal. That's what I wanted to do. I want to step on the court with an average person and just be able to beat the average person. Anyone with real professional training who's really competed and has that, I'd like to at least hold my own, but I'm okay with losing against them. That was my goal. So you have to think about that for yourself with languages. You could, but for most people, it's not going to be realistic for you to say, I want to speak like a native speaker. It's just not going to. You're not going to put the amount of time required. You don't have it. You don't want to have that kind of lifestyle to be studying that much. You have other priorities. There's so much. You're not interested in pronunciation, for example. There's a lot of factors. So you have to look yourself in the mirror and figure out, okay, what do I realistically want to work towards? If I'm not going to become a professional in the language, because that requires a whole lifestyle shift, what do I want to do? So going back to the whole topic of this video, the main title and everything, the reason people get discouraged often has to do with the expectations they have in their mind. A lot of people are expecting something that is really, really high and really advanced and really ambitious and everything, and it doesn't match with their actions. Other people are a little different. Maybe they don't expect themselves to ever become like a native speaker, but maybe they thought that they would make progress faster than they are. It would be like if I thought I would lose 20 pounds in a month because I'm trying to lose weight, but after a month I've only lost 4 or 5. Maybe 4 to 5 pounds is fantastic, but I'm not going to think it's fantastic because in my mind the expectation was 20 pounds or 30 or 15 or whatever the number is. So you have to think about what your expectations are with that language as well, and that's going to help you a lot. So this has been going for 13 minutes. Let's maybe do one or two more quick little things. There we go. We got there eventually. A little activity I want to share with everybody to improve your speaking ability. This is something I shared on my podcast, so podcast people who listen to it, you might have already heard this, but let's talk about it again, because I know not everyone here listens to the podcast. Often, when you have a lower intermediate level, or even a beginner level in a language, or even maybe you're stronger in the language, but you don't have confidence when it comes to speaking, I challenge you to do the following. Whether you can do this with a teacher, a private teacher, or a group private teacher, or you can do this literally at home using your phone. You need to I want you to go to Google, and I want you to search topics for language exchanges. There's lots of websites that give you different questions, conversation starters, essentially. And what I want you to do is open one of these websites, look at the sample questions they give you, and I want you to either A, on your phone, record yourself, or B, with a private tutor. I want you to respond to one of those questions, but you must talk for at least 60 seconds. Let's say 30 to 60 seconds, between 30 and 60. I prefer to do this with a private tutor, because a private tutor can give you a little bit of direction, can ask a couple follow-up questions. There's a lot that they can do. But you could do it at home as well if you'd like. And it's an exercise that forces you to speak and get words out of your mouth, and you're going to realize you're able to speak a heck of a lot more than you thought you could. I have a really cool story around this. I've been working with this one particular lady and giving her French lessons. She has, in my opinion, she has like an intermediate level in the language. Now, in her opinion, she's a beginner. And as a result, in Calgary, I organize various French and Spanish and different language events. As a result, this particular individual would rarely go to any intermediate events that I organized because she didn't feel she was at that level. It was too hard for her. We did this activity, and we did this with various different questions. And she spoke for an hour, and we talked about deep topics, politics, and where she's from, and where we're from, and the economy, and so many deep topics for like an hour. And she was doing 80, 70 to 90% of the talking. I was just listening and asking questions here and there. And it made her realize, holy cow, here I thought I had this beginner level, and yet I was able to talk about deep concepts for a whole hour. So a lot of you, I think, and I've been doing this with more and more people, and I'm realizing that, yes, it works reasonably consistently. So teachers who are watching this, learners who are watching this, this is something you must try, and I think you will see success with this particular strategy. Also with language learning, what else can we talk about here? I have a few different things on my mind. Yeah, I think right now I'll spit out a few other thoughts that are going around. That is going around my mind. So first and foremost, let's respond to the comment that just came through. French is not an important language. Is that right? Can you tell us a little bit about that? Yeah, if a language is important or if a language isn't important, depends heavily upon how you define important. I think that's the biggest thing. If you define important by how many countries speak French, one could make a very solid argument that, sure, maybe it's not as important as other languages. Arabic is spoken, to my knowledge, is spoken in more countries than French. Spanish is spoken in more countries than French. English is spoken in more countries than French. So if that's how we're defining if a language is important, yeah, you're right. What's his name? You're right, Ali, you're right. Absolutely. Now, if you define importance with a different definition, perhaps it is important. I live in Canada. I have different students who are learning French because in Canada, if you speak French, you can often make more money at your job because we have two official languages, English and French. Obviously, within Canada itself, French is not the most useful thing in the world because it's not spoken in most of Canada. But for job purposes, companies will often pay you more if you speak some French, or you can find different jobs because you speak French. So in that case, I think you're wrong, and I think for people, if that's your definition, it's absolutely super important. I've got one of my students right now wants to work for the UN, the United Nations. That's something he's working towards actively for him, and he wants to work in many, I forget exactly what his exact ambition is, but for some, I think the path he wants to go down in the UN would require him to speak French, or it really is beneficial for him to speak French. In that case, it's very important. So the importance is not strictly based upon how many speakers there are, how many countries speak it. There's a lot of factors. Gujarati, language I'm learning, is not, in theory, is not an important language. I don't think anyway. I don't think there are big job opportunities for Gujarati speakers. There's not really a ton of stuff that's going to open up for me. But to me, it's incredibly important because my family speaks that language. That's where we come from. It has very personal importance to me. Even though in Gujarat, I can go and I can speak a lot of English, I can speak Hindi, I can speak different languages, and it'll be just fine. But for me, it has personal importance. So importance when you look at the importance of a language, it's not just, there's a lot that goes into it, is basically what I'm trying to say. And there's different ways you can look at what's important versus what isn't important. Anything else we can talk about here? I can share some different things, maybe one or two things on my mind personally, and then we can finish this video here. I'm watching the DC's Legends of Tomorrow on TV, by the way. What a great show. I love this show. What's unique about this television show and what I like about it so much is that what a crazy transition, no? From all these language learning stuff to television. But what I love about Legends of Tomorrow, this television show, is that unlike every other show, I get the feeling that the Legends of Tomorrow are writing the show in a way where it's fun for the cast, it's fun for the actors, and it's fun for the people who work there. And they're just trying to have fun. So as a result, it's goofy, it's funny, it's lighthearted. Everyone seems to be enjoying themselves. There's a lot of cool things that are going on. Versus other shows, there's agendas, they're worried about ratings, and there's a lot of stuff, and you can almost feel it. You can see it. You're like, oh, the writers changed. Ugh, I can see that. Or, oh, they're doing that because of blah, 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 blah. They're leaving a cliffhanger because of this. Like, you can see it. I'm sure in Legends of Tomorrow, there's certain things they're considering like that, but the feeling you get in the show is that people are just trying to have fun, and that makes it really fun to watch. I love it. Love this show. It is amazing. Also on my mind right now, and this is a big one actually, I'm excited to talk about this. A lot of my content is geared towards language learning from the perspective of a language learner. But I've realized recently, and I mentioned a lot of this on my podcast, and I've mentioned a lot of this on my podcast. There we go. But I'm actually pretty good at teaching. I think I've developed a skill set in teaching, not just languages, but teaching in general, and helping people understand things. I've developed a certain skill set around communication. And I don't talk a lot about language education from the perspective of teaching languages. And I think it's something that I'm going to start talking about more. It's a theme that you may have noticed on the podcast if you follow it, the Language Learning Show. If you don't follow it, now you can follow it. It's something I've started to talk about a lot more there. And I think the reason behind it, and this is a strength of mine, but also a flaw, and I think probably a lot of you have this too. A strength and a flaw of mine is I'm quite introspective, and I'm always thinking about, I'm trying to notice the things that I could be doing to get better at my work, at teaching, at my languages, and life. I'm thinking a lot about stuff that I could do to get better. And as a result, I put so much focus on trying to get better at stuff that I sometimes I don't even realize that maybe I'm good at something, or maybe I'm adequate at something. Sometimes I don't fully realize it because I'm so focused on, oh, that's not working well, let's fix this, let's do that, blah, 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 blah. And that's obviously positive in many ways, and it can help you in many ways, and it blah, blah, blah. But it's funny how sometimes you forget that you have certain strengths. And I've just been realizing recently that, man, I've got certain strengths that I think I have to talk more about and be confident that I have a strength in that. Obviously not perfect, but I have strengths in certain areas. Because if I can share it from that kind of perspective, I can give advice and I can give insights and talk about things that I believe can help people. And I think it can really even help me. If I embrace the fact that I've got certain strengths, I can play to those strengths. And I could use them to benefit me in my life. If I don't acknowledge those strengths, if I don't acknowledge it, and I don't even consciously realize, oh, I'm good at blah, 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 I'm good at this, I've got a strength in this, da, 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 da. It's more difficult to play to those strengths. So something that's been going on in my mind the past little while. All right, guys, this has been going for 23 minutes. I think it's time to wrap it up. I'm going to watch DC's Legends of Tomorrow. I'm going to watch it on YouTube on my phone here. I'm going to chill for the rest of the evening. I got to clean this out. You can't see it, but there's a big mess on this table because I didn't know what food I wanted to eat for dinner, and I just took out every food, and I looked at it for a while and thought about it. So there's like 17 foods on the table here. So I got to clean that up. And yeah, thanks again for watching, guys. I appreciate it. You guys rock, and we will talk. We'll talk next time. See you. Bye for now.